Hey, you, back off. Back off. That's it. You just keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Hey, back up. Back up. Yeah, I just shot someone. They came at me with a knife. I'm at the Old Bridge Road in front of the old warehouse. You're gonna need an ambulance and the police. So what is brandishing a firearm? Are we supposed to shoot anytime that we draw a firearm? Well, before we talk about it, let's look at the firearm that I was using today. Look at this lovely piece of steel. This is a Ruger GP 100 3-inch barrel, and it has just a wonderful balance and aim point. Hey, I may be giving Smith & Wesson the old heave-ho after shooting this one. So let's talk about brandishing. Now, first thing out of the way, I am no attorney, and I'm not giving legal advice here. Every state has specifically different laws consisting or considering pointing a firearm or recklessly carrying or waving a firearm, and you need to know your own state's laws. But let's talk common sense here. All right, about 3 months ago, I was in a gun store talking to the FFL, and I was relating him the story of my friend Tommy, who is a disabled retired firefighter down in Georgia, and how he had a man come up to him to strong arm rob him, to intimidate him with physical force. To which Tommy stepped back, he drew a burst of thunder, and in that old country twang said, "Not today," and the guy ran off. Well, there was a gun shop commando. Y'all know the type, big, blustery. Well, he would have been charged with brandishing. And I'm like, well, so that means the dozen or so times I had to draw my firearm as a police officer to cover a suspect means that I should have shot them? Well, no, but he's a citizen. That's brandishing. Well, you know, Tommy immediately went to go see the county sheriff in that rural county, who told him, "Tommy, you did everything right." Well, in other places, he would have been arrested for brandishing. Well, you can't talk to a hardhead. Maybe not. All right, but let's examine this. You know, first off, once again, a police officer does this all the time to apprehend a suspect, to stop a situation. You know, he presents deadly force hopefully in a controlled manner, not a arbitrary waving the gun around manner, not trying to threaten somebody, but in a very controlled, deliberate manner. Now, this is using deadly force whether I pull the trigger or not. And police officers do this all the time. Do you mean to tell me that if they perceive a deadly threat, that when they draw, they must shoot? Now, let's look at that CDC study that the Obama administration kind of swept under the rug, where they studied actual citizen defense uses. They found that every year approximately, or it could be estimated, from several 100,000 to a couple of 1,000,000 times Americans, ordinary Americans, used a firearm to stop a deadly threat. Now obviously every time, only a very, very small percentage of those Americans actually shot that firearm and wounded or stopped that suspect from attacking them or a loved one. You mean to tell me in all those instances that if they drew their firearm because they felt their life or the life of someone else was in deadly peril, that rather than just stop the attack, they should have went ahead and proceeded to fire and wound or possibly kill that person? I don't think so. Now, you should never draw a firearm to intimidate or try to scare someone. You should always draw it, once again, like the police officer. You're offering deadly force with the intent and deliberation that if you have to, you will pull that trigger. All right. Now let me tell you another story, and I've related this story involving my friend Buck and how he honked an air horn at a woman who was texting at a stop sign, and she got mad and she pulled out a gun and turned around and waved it at him. Okay, now that was brandishing, and the woman could have been charged for that. All right, let me give you another example of brandishing. During Nancy Pelosi's Summer of Love, where there were riots and damage and property damage and people murdered all across our country because of riots and protests due to the George Floyd killing, which was very tragic. There was a riot in Missouri, I believe, St. Louis, in a city, an urban city, and a couple. They were trial attorneys at a very nice house they had spent a lot of money renovating, and a group of rioters tore a gate down or breached a gate and came through their property. These two attorneys, a man and a woman, they saw all these rioters coming through their property, so they decided to do something. The man had an AR, and he stood there with his AR, not carrying it down, not pointing it up. It was on their own property, but ready to go. The wife had a Jennings semi-auto, one that they were using in a some type of civil suit they were bringing against that firearms company. She had that semi-auto, and she was standing there just randomly pointing at people. Okay, now there was no direct deadly threat on their persons. All right, now I understand about protecting your property, but they could have stood there and watched as the people gone by instead of brandishing those firearms. In fact, probably the best thing they could have done if they felt that threatened was to go inside, barricade themselves in their home in some form or fashion. Well, obviously they got charged under whatever Missouri law there is that has to do with brandishing a firearm, and got real political, and eventually the governor pardoned them, and you know, all's well that ends well. Nobody got killed. They didn't get that on their criminal record. Okay. The point is, you got to be careful with the gun shop commandos, and you hear it on the internet forums where, you know, people make, you know, a lot of pronouncements that they probably ought to hope never shows up in court if they ever have to use deadly force to preserve their life or the life of another. But use common sense. You never draw a firearm, you never point a firearm, you never present a firearm unless your life or the life of somebody else is in immediate deadly peril. And if that is enough to stop the threat, then that's a win. All right? And if not, well, you do what you have to do to preserve your life or the life of someone else. Now, you notice in that first scenario that I did, and I didn't try to hold that attacker, that would-be attacker. You know, I told them to back off and get away. All right, you're not a police officer. Now, a police officer's job is to apprehend, all right, to arrest. Your job or your responsibility is to stop that attack. And if you can get them to leave, then let them leave. Now, that is my opinion, okay? And you may share a different opinion. But if you can avoid having to shoot someone, having to kill someone, you're a whole lot better off being a good witness to a crime than having to justify why you took someone's life in self-defense. All right, I've given you things to think about. Please think about them. And this is Greg with Lionquestfitness reminding you to always be prepared for the unexpected.